and welcome to our next segment reading of the Asatru Edda. I am Asgarod Skegg, and today's chapter is entitled Niflungar, which is a continuation from our last chapter. Freyr had been staying with his foster father Volundr when the news came to Ivaldi's sons that Odin had caused their father's death and that Volundr's forgings were compared with Sindri's and had failed. Volundr and Egil met to talk, but said nothing to each other, nor did they want Wergild from Odin for their father's death. Volundr, as usual, was friendly to his foster son and hid their newfound anger from him. But the magnificent gold-stitched tapestries in the brothers' halls were taken down, and among the best of the gold ornaments and weapons which shined on their walls were gradually removed. Their previously filled treasure chamber was now emptied. They fled into the dark regions beyond the Niflungar. Those treasures that were not recovered by famous heroes in a later time still lie in caverns and mountain halls where they are brooded over by Ormr or immersed in deep stream beds where they are watched by Vaetir who hold on to the nearby rocks in the rivers or strand ridges. Because Ivaldi and his sons are known as Niflungar or Gjökungar, their treasure is known as Hod Niflunga. Hence, gold is called Niflungar, treasure or inheritance. The Godin began to think that Ivaldi's sons had reason to be dissatisfied with them. Njord, whose son was in Volundr's possession and care, was worried. He consulted with Odin about what should be done, and it was decided that Volundr would be honored by a tying of bonds of kinship with the Godin. Njord would ask his daughter Skadi to be his wife, and she would thus be elevated to an Asanja. In this way, the Godin would make up for the judgment that was pronounced over Volundr's forgings and show how they valued him. They would give compensation for Ivaldi's death, even though he broke his oath to them and had caused his own ruin. Njord sent messengers selected among the Vanir who followed under him to Volundr. The messengers were to deliver Njord's marriage request, but they never returned. Volundr was vexed to meet this obstinate demand for a suit. In a cruel endeavor to check his impotent woer's ardor, he rushed the envoys off to execution. While they waited for the messengers to return, Odin decided to seek out Volundr himself, accompanied by Honir and Loki. The visit would be made in all simplicity and without bringing any attention to them in the world. Odin did not put his golden armor on Sleipnir's back, but he and his companions dressed themselves in the custom of ordinary travelers and subjected themselves to the same conditions. So they came to Edda. Here they wandered for a long time in peaceful dales between snow-capped mountain peaks, but they could not find their way to the Asatru. Volundr had a sharper eye on the Godar than they on him, was as great a sorcerer as he was an artist, and was equally proficient with the evil Seder as with the holy Godar. He arranged it so that the three Godar traveled to many caverns, but never to the right one. At a certain place, he had an ambush planned, and he finally directed the traveler's course there. It was by a well in an oak-covered valley where it seemed inviting to rest. There, he laid down a magical instrument that he had forged, which looked like an ordinary pole or stick. Odin, Loki, and Honir had traveled across mountains and wildernesses where they found little food. The Lady Wolf flew noisily to meet the commanders of the crew no short time ago in an old one's form. When the Godar came down into a certain valley, they saw a herd of reindeer and took one of them, and one of them, the one called Taurine, and set it on an earth oven. Long ago, the eagle alighted where the Aesir put their meat into an earth oven. The mountain tier of Berges Argefen was not found guilty of cowardice. And when they thought the meat must be ready, they opened the earth oven and it was not cooked. The taurine was quite hard between the bones for the godar to cut. And a second time when they opened the oven after some time had passed, it was still not cooked. As they began asking each other what could be the cause, they heard a voice from above in an oak tree under which they were standing. The one who was up in the tree said he was the reason the food remained uncooked in the oven. Looking up, they saw an eagle sitting there, and it was not small. They asked, "Why do you cause this? Ornament giver of the Godin, concealed in a guise." The much wise corpse heap wave gull began to speak from an ancient fir. Honir's friend was not well disposed to him. The eagle said, "I will grant, if you will grant me my fill of the reindeer, then the oven will cook." They agreed to this. The mountain wolf asked Stepmali to share out to him his fill of the holy table. The raven god's friend had to blow on the fire. Then the eagle glided down from the tree and landed on the oven. The Rognir of the winged cars of land Wales let himself drop down where the guileless defenders of the Godin were sitting. The gracious Lord of Earth bade Farbati's son quickly share the bowstring's Var's wail among the fellows. But the cunning, unyielding opponent of the Aesir thereupon snatched up 4 reindeer parts from the place for the spread feast. The first thing he did was eat the reindeer's 2 thighs and both its shoulders. And the hungry father of swords was then eating the yoke there horribly at the roots of the oak that was long ago. This angered Loki, who picked up a large pole and swung with all of his strength. The deep-minded Warbuti, withholding God, struck the mightiest enemy of the earth down between the shoulder with the pole. Recoiling from the blow, the eagle started to fly, but one end of the pole was stuck fast to the eagle's body, with Loki hanging on the other end. So the burden of Singin's arms, whom all the power's eyes in his bonds got struck on Odrgod's foster. The pole clung to the powerful hunter of Jotunheimer, and the hand of Honir's good friend to the end of the rod. The eagle flew so low that Loki's feet were dragging on the ground, striking stones, gravel, and tree, and he thought his arms would be pulled out of their sockets. The bird of blood, happy it is with its booty, flew a long distance with the wise god, so that the wolf's father was about to be ripped in two. Then Thor's friend tired out, for Lopter Loki was heavy, who had journeyed with Midgunger's mate, could now sue for peace. He called out, begging the eagle for mercy, but the bird answered that Loki would not be saved unless he swore an oath that he would find a way to lure Idun with her apples out of Asgard. The scion of Hymir's race instructed the cruel guider, crazy with pain, to bring him the maid who possessed the Elif Asa. When Loki agreed, he was set free and returned to his companions. Nothing else is said to have occurred during this trip before they reached home. In Asgard, Odin had nothing good to report about the journey, so Njord decided to go there himself. Balder and Hodor offered to accompany him. They armed themselves, climbed onto their saddles, and set out. The purpose of the journey was not war, but reconciliation. For this reason, Njord did not want to be accompanied by Thor or Tyr or any of the other Aesir, as they were quick to strike. Admittedly, Hodor had been violent in nature in his early childhood, but under Baldur's influence he had become peaceable and was counted among the Godar called Runnar, of whom Baldur was foremost. The three Godar came to Volundr's fortress, but found it empty. Then they rode to Egil's fortress by the Alivagar. To their surprise, they noticed that here and there in the distance, Jotunheimer's inhabitants peered out at them. Previously, the Jotnar had never come over the Alivagar to the coasts of the Idar, but the watch of the sons of Ivaldi on these waters had ceased, thus allowing the Jotnar to come, as many as they wanted to, into the land that the Aesir had created for the race of men. Njord and his companions quickened their ride and soon caught sight of whom they sought, Volundr. He was accompanied by Egil and the third brother, Slagfinr. They were on their way to Jotunheimer. The three brothers stopped when they saw the Godar approach, and Volundr yelled, "What do you want?" Njord responded that he wanted peace with his son's guardian and foster father, with the Godin's good friend and gift giver. "No peace," cried Volundr, "without revenge." Njord then inquired as to where Freyr was. Volundr told him that his son had been delivered to the Jotnar. "Damn you! Who has broken sacred oaths?" was Njord's reply. Njord then said, "Damn the oath itself, you unjust judges, you incompetent Godar." "We are done with words," yelled Hodor. "Now weapons will talk. Treacherous sons of Ivaldi, will you stand and fight?" At this, Egil stepped forward and challenged Njord. "You of low birth, you Thrale," shouted Hodor, "do you dare challenge one of Asgard's finest?" Egil was then challenged by Hodor to prevent Njord from encountering an ignoble person. As Hodor was attaching an arrow to the string of his bent bow, a shaft shot by Egil suddenly pierced the cord at the top. It was succeeded by a fellow arrow which dug into the knuckles of his fist. A third appeared and struck the arrow fitted to the bowstring. Egil, intentionally using his talent for long-range archery to merely hit his foe's weapon, tried to discourage the champion from his purpose by indicating that he could easily do the same to his body. Nevertheless, Hodor's nerve was not in the least diminished. He despised hazard to his person and entered danger with spirit and expression unaltered, seeing nothing to make any acknowledgment of Egil's skill nor remit any of his unusual valor. Quite undetermined from his intent, he fearlessly devoted himself to the duel. Both combatants were wounded and withdrew. Now, behind the sons of Ivaldi appear a number of their new allies, a host of dreadful Jotnar who belonged to Beli's At, whose heads were like hounds. Volundr had surrendered Freyr to him. They came in a fog and mist and obscured the whole area. The sons of Ivaldi fled and vanished into the haze. Hodor possessed a dog of unusual savagery, a horrifying, vicious brute which was a terror for people to live with, for it had quite often killed a dozen men unaided. The creature was a pet of the Jotun Ofati and would guard his herd while it was grazing. Hodor unleashed his hound, set it on his adversaries, which caused them to fall back. But Ivaldi's sons were gone, and it was then that the Godar knew that their errand was lost. In sorrow, they rode back to Asgardr. Before the sons of Ivaldi continued on their way, they laid hands on one of Egil's arrows and swore they would never work again in the service of others, and that their freedom may be regarded as established, which they confirmed in their accustomed way of the arrow. uttering certain words of their country in confirmation of the fact. Then we traveled on to Yarn Vidar. Thank you very much for joining us on this next segment reading of the Asatru Edda. I hope you enjoyed the content. Please support the channel, hit that thumbs up button, and subscribe to catch all of our new content. Thank you very much again for listening in, and we'll see you on the next segment.